The first pale light touches the peaks of the Alban Hills, as a young man named Caius, stiff muscles protesting the chill morning air. His small camp of fellow workers stirs, the murmur of greetings and the scrape of settling gear blending into the steady crackle of the fire, where breakfast will soon be ready. With a quick glance at his calloused hands, he reaches for a tunic, a rough homespun wool that does little to ward off the lingering cold. They are all different ages, from boys barely out of childhood to men long marked by years of toil. Not everyone is thrilled about reaching the city, for when they reach it, their work will be done. This camp is just a temporary stop on the road, and once they pass the Tiber, they will move on to another. The baths where tired travelers can rest, the forum bustling with commerce and politics, the streets filled with vendors and a free man beside a slave, a veteran beside a condemned criminal, a boy and an old man. They all share the same burdens and the same weariness. They also share the same rewards, the grunt of satisfaction after a perfect strike, the surge of pride when a massive block falls into place. These are the true architects of Rome, the ones who did not design the city's buildings, but built them block by block. Every sunrise brought them closer to the heart of the empire. They raised structures that defied the heavens, lifting their gazes skyward, shaping the landscape with their bare hands, taming nature with their unwavering resolve. Each swing of the hammer, each stroke of the chisel, each placement of the stone was a testament to their enduring spirit. They were the backbone of Rome, the silent heroes of its rise, their names lost to time, their faces blurred in the canvas of history. Yet their legacy lived on in every majestic edifice, every architectural marvel, every monumental achievement that defined the Roman world. They were the weavers of stone, the sculptors of empires, the makers of Rome. Every sunset brought them one step farther into its embrace. Their steps resonated with the pulse of the city, their sweat mingled with its dust, their hopes soared with its ambitions. The men were not just builders, they were participants in the making of an eternal city. They were not just laborers, they were contributors to the grandeur of a timeless empire, the ones who never saw the finished structure but left their imprint on every stone, every column, every dome. They shaped Rome with their sweat and their tears, with their aching muscles and their uncomplaining backs. They are the heartbeat of the city, the pulse of its life, the rhythm of its soul. As the centuries turned, their work echoed in the aqueducts that carried water to Rome, in the roads that radiated from it, in the buildings that defined it. The silent strength of their labor gave form to an empire, and in doing so, they became Rome. They were the makers of Rome, the fellowship of the evening meal when the day's work is done, and the simple pleasure of putting down their tools. At least for now. For tomorrow, the overseer will return and the march will resume, taking them farther into the heart of Rome. Rome is everywhere, and the men are building every part of it, piece by piece, brick by brick, hand over bleeding hand, making it real. Everywhere they look, they see evidence of the city's ever-present power, the soldiers riding past, the purple-robed senator, the litter bearing the plump body of some rich woman on the way to the baths. The whole city seems to pass by them on its way to glory. The men walk forward, carrying the weight of the city on their shoulders, their eyes fixed on the road ahead. They cannot see what they are building, but they feel it in their bones. They know they are creating the grandeur of Rome, and for better or for worse, they are becoming part of it too. Others may choose to stay, but most don't. Few people leave the city without wanting to get as far away from it as possible. Still, there is little choice in the matter. Gods and monsters, Thales meant to raise their spirits as the long shadows stretch across the road. Tonight, let us sit with them around the dying embers of the fire, sharing the quiet companionship of those who do not speak much, but understand so much. Let us eat with them, biting into crusty bread dipped in vinegar or chunks of cheese, grateful for the taste of salt, and let us drink with them, raising our cups of wine or watered-down beer to our throats, rejoicing in the warmth that spreads through us. Tonight, let us rest beside them, lying on the hard ground beneath a thin blanket, looking up at the stars. Let us watch the Milky Way arch across the heavens and listen to the constellations whisper their timeless tales. And as sleep claims us, let us dream the dreams of laborers, of journeys almost ended, of milestones passed, and of a city that stretches ever onward, towards the sun and the sky, towards eternity. When the work is done, you either find new labor or find yourself. Well, the options were limited if you were desperate times. Some are free men, some are slaves, and some somewhere in between. The pace is set and they fall into step, marching north, and then they are gone. Along with them, the rhythm of their labor, which echoes even in their absence. In the days that follow, we hear them again, rising at dawn, eating a breakfast of bread and cheese, perhaps a bit of sausage if they are lucky, then setting out, marching steadily north. Their footsteps pound the hot stones of the road, their voices chanting in unison to keep the beat. Soon their bodies flow together, their movements synchronized by hours of shared toil and sweat. There are few sounds louder than the human will, a will tempered by necessity and driven by the irresistible demands of survival. Whether they are free or not, whether they love Rome or loathe it, they have a job to do and they do it, again and again. They are not building anything themselves, but they are essential to the structures that rise around them. They haul gravel up scaffolding, they drag blocks the size of chariots up ramps, they polish marble floors until they shine like a mirror. They create the straight lines and soaring curves of aqueducts and fountains, the materials that will bear the glories of Rome. They are crafting a city worthy of a god, and they are doing it with their bare hands, calloused and scarred hands. Hands that can pick up a hammer or hold a chisel, hands that can mix cement or hoist a bucket, hands that can bend stone to the divine will of Rome. Some are volunteers drawn by the promise of pay or advancement, while others have been condemned by the courts to a set number of years of forced labor. Most of them, though, are simply here because there was nowhere else to go, nothing else to do. The farm had failed. The family needed money. The war had taken everything. So they came to the city, where the greatest building project in the world hung like a beacon on the horizon. They came to build the very foundations of Rome itself. He pulls it on, tucking it into the leather belt already fastened around his hips. Practicality over adornment was their watchword here on the road, the only luxury being the hope of reaching their destination before nightfall. And since most of them have been walking this road many times, they know what waits for them. Their work will take them north along the Appian Way, one of the ancient world's most renowned roads. Built during the Republic by Appius Claudius, its well-pathed surface and carefully calibrated mile markers are there for all to use. But it is these very features that make it so taxing for those who are not traveling under the shelter of Rome's protection. There are no inns or farms for miles, and travelers must carry everything they need with them. In late antiquity, the roadside shrines and tombs grow thicker, hinting at the great city looming ahead. But even as the buildings and crowds of Rome draw closer, there is little joy here for the weary travelers. For this road is not just a route, it is a gauntlet, and each mile takes them further from their homes. The men begin to drift toward the road, moving like the tide around a headland, flowing and turning to avoid obstacles. As the group huddles together near the start of the workday, waiting for the overseer to arrive, a murmur runs through the crowd. But for now, the overseer is still absent and the men turn back to the road. And what is Rome? More than a collection of stones, it is the Colosseum that roars with blood sport, the temples where the gods are honored. In their work, the men are united, regardless of their status. Yet for tonight, let us linger with the workers listening to their songs, tales of home and family, of lovers and losses. Rome is built of stone and blood, but it is held aloft by something more, something almost invisible, the quiet strength of millions of hands, the cumulative effort of countless calloused arms. From the cobbled streets to the towering monuments, from the humble houses to the magnificent palaces, from the bustling markets to the serene temples, Rome unfolded before them, a symphony of stone and marble. They walked on roads that connected the known world, carrying the weight of the empire on their shoulders. This is the story of Spartacus, and this is his story. His story, you have been warned. You won't last a day in the Roman Colosseum. You won't last a day in ancient Thebes. You won't last a day in ancient Greece. You won't last a day in Imperial Rome. You won't last a day in a Roman gladiator school. You won't last a day working in a Roman vineyard. Now you are here, about to step into the greatest spectacle in the world. The first thing you notice is the sand. That's right. The floor of the Colosseum was covered in sand, and that sand would soak up the blood of thousands upon thousands of men, women, and children. Muscular men with crude weapons, battling to the death, clashing swords, shields, and spears, leaping over fallen opponents, finishing them off with brutal efficiency. A pair of lovers embracing, a family picnicking together, two boys fighting over a lost coin, a woman gossiping with her friends. These are all normal everyday things, but here in the Colosseum, they're played out against the backdrop of violence and death. The next thing you notice are the crowds, 80,000 people strong, packed into a tight spiral of stands around the oval arena. Horses rearing up, kicking out with deadly hooves. Lions pouncing, sinking their teeth into throats. All of these animals are killers, but none of them compare to the most terrifying beast of all, the human animal. The pay was terrible, the hours were long, and the competition was fierce. Let's say you survived the competition. What then? Well, you'd get to fight in the Colosseum, of course. But that wasn't all. You'd also have to put up with the jeers of the crowd, the taunts of your fellow gladiators, and the scorn of your fellow soldiers. Being a gladiator was more than just a job, it was a way of life. Plus, the danger was real. Every day, gladiators died in the arena. After years of grueling combat, you have risen to the top of your barracks. Now you are the star of the Colosseum. One day you get a cut that won't heal. You catch a fever that won't go away. And all of us, gladiators, charioteers, trainers, slaves, criminals, animals, we all do our parts to entertain them. You leave the arena behind. You walk through the city, past the shops and taverns and brothels. You cross the Tiber River, climb the Palatine Hill, turn around and look back at the Colosseum. It's still there, just as you left it. The crowds are gone, but the sand is still stained with their blood. You wonder if you'll ever forget what you saw here, if you can ever escape the sounds of the crowd, the smell of the blood, the taste of the fear. You shake your head and walk away. You don't want to think about it anymore. You want to forget, but you can't. And neither can Rome, because Rome is built on blood. Rome is built on sand. Rome is built on the screams of the crowd. Or maybe you just get tired of fighting. You refuse to enter the arena. The crowd boos. The emperor is angry. You are thrown into the lion's den. Your body is tossed into the Tiber River. The next day it washes up on the shore. Yet beneath its grandeur, intrigue, corruption, and decadence ran rampant. How could such a great civilization fall? This is Rome. Nobody cares. The show must go on. The crowds cheer your name. They shower you with gold coins. The emperor himself has invited you to dinner. Life is good. They had come to see blood. They had come to see death. For some of them, it was a holiday. Even today, you can hear it in the movies. The shouts and screams of 80,000 people. They scream and yell and throw objects into the arena. He's from your hometown. He's got friends and family in the crowd. They're all cheering him on. Suddenly, it's personal. You fight and you win. But you can't help but feel sorry for the man. He'll never see his family again. But my favorite are the gladiators. The way they move, the way they fight, the way they kill. It's beautiful to watch. You try to forget the day's events. You can still feel the sting of their blood on your hands. Not that you would ever get a chance to watch them up close. In fact, you wouldn't even be allowed to watch them at all. Unless, of course, you were one of the 300 gladiators who fought in the games that day. It's a primal sound. The sound of a beast being fed. It's the sound of humanity letting loose. They were trained in special schools run by the state, where they were taught how to fight with every weapon known to man. Not only that, but once you entered a gladiator school, you couldn't leave. You were basically sentenced to a life of fighting to the death. They lived in barracks with other gladiators, eating, training, and planning their attacks. When they weren't training, they performed in the arena. Our show starts with a bang, with a roar of lions as two pairs of lions pace their cages, ready for the hunt. There's a roar of the crowd. Charioteers curse at one another, and one driver loses control, crashing into the stands, sending terrified spectators tumbling down to the sand. The driver lashes his horses and drives off before anyone can stop him. Here in the Colosseum, they don't care about your past life. In fact, they don't even know you exist. To them, you're nothing but food for the lions. For others, it was their daily entertainment. For still others, it was a way of life. They would follow the games for weeks at a time, traveling with the circus as it moved from city to city. These were the Roman masses, loud and boisterous and full of beer, with pockets full of coins they didn't mind spending on prostitutes and wine, and yes, on gladiators. And then you hear the roar of the crowd. It's a sound that echoes through history. Now you see the show. Here in the Colosseum, your life is going to be very short. Next it's the chariots, thundering around the track, kicking up clouds of dust, whipping around corners, crashing into one another. Then there are the gladiators. But let's take a break from the bloodshed and look at something else happening in the stands. It's enough to make you puke. Now it's time for the beasts. Elephants with tusks like swords, tearing through the ranks of gladiators. There are all kinds of fighters in the Colosseum. Gauls with woad paint on their faces. Cimmerians with their shaggy manes. Bald and muscled Iberians. Elegant and quick Thracians. Gladiators came from all over the empire. Some were slaves, others were criminals, and still others were just young men looking for adventure. So, you want to be a gladiator? Too bad you can't. The gladiator schools were closed to outsiders. Even if you could be a gladiator, you probably wouldn't want to be. But let's say you were a gladiator. Let's just say you were one of the best, but you are haunted by nightmares. You can still hear the screams of your fallen comrades. And then there are the families of your victims. They come to the games to watch you fight. One day, you find yourself facing off against a man you know. That night, you go to the baths. The hot water relaxes your muscles. The slaves massage your body. In the end, you die in the arena. You fought for years. Your body is battered and bruised. And so, the cycle continues. Year after year, the crowds come to the Colosseum, they watch the games. They cheer and scream and throw objects. Except you leave early. You realize this isn't your dream job. You're done. You don't want to be a gladiator anymore. So, you quit. Rome is built on the bones of the dead. Do you think you could survive a day in Rome? The empire was vast, powerful, and seemingly invincible. What does it mean to die in war? How do you remember those who fell on the field? In our modern wars, the dead are often shipped home in flag-draped coffins, laid to rest in white marble monuments. But the Romans had no such customs. Instead, they left the majority of their dead where they fell. And so today, we're going to explore how archaeologists uncover the stories of individual soldiers through mass graves from the Roman Empire. A mother cradling her child, a slave kneeling before his master, a servant pinned beneath a fallen column, a charioteer forever frozen in the posture of holding the reins. For example, one young woman was found wearing shackles. They were not mercenaries hired by Rome, but rather members of the elite Praetorian Guard, personally loyal to the emperor. Scientists learned that these men were part of the elite Praetorian Guard, Emperor Nero's personal bodyguards. They had followed him to Herculaneum for protection, but they were not prepared for the volcano. Medical researchers examined the bones to see how long it took the residents to die and whether they suffered. Some victims died quickly from smoke inhalation. Researchers hope to learn even more by extracting DNA from the bones. This will allow them to identify the people as individuals, giving names and faces to the victims of the eruption. Others survived for days, eating the last food they could find and drinking salty seawater. In the end, they perished from dehydration. Her skeleton revealed that she had been malnourished, possibly given only scraps of food, but she had been literate, able to read and write. It erased him so that no one would know the face of rebellion. So we ask, how do we remember the dead? Do we bury them, entomb them, put them on display? What is the point of commemorating the past? Ancient Romans had no interest in preserving the lives of their soldiers. They died en masse and were sent to anonymous graves. Archaeology has allowed us to recover some of their stories, but we are still left with more questions than answers. What were their names? What did they eat? Where were they from? We may never know. Their ghosts are trapped in the ruins, hidden underneath the ash. They are a mass of bones without faces, without voices, without stories. But by studying the skeletons, we can get closer to understanding their lives and deaths. We can pay tribute to those who fell, not with marble and gold, but with science and memory. Because sometimes the best way to honor the dead is to unearth their secrets, to give them names, to make them real. The Romans failed to do this, but we can try to do better. And she had lived to the age of 30, which meant she had been well-behaved, useful, and therefore valuable to her owner. He kept his own tomb simple, a modest monument containing his ashes and those of his wife. He wanted to be seen as a private citizen, not an ostentatious monarch. The mass graves of antiquities serve as a reminder of this. It was adorned with a golden chariot. The story goes that his ghost would rise from the tomb and lead his people to victory in war. But Rome was never told of his burial place. Maybe the greatest revenge was that his enemies didn't even know where he rested. They show us that for all their discipline, training, and loyalty, Roman soldiers were expendable. They were cannon fodder in an empire's drive for more land. The greatest threat to these men was not the enemy, but their own leaders' desire for more. They are surrounded by shoes, cups, dishes, and jewelry dropped in the chaos of the eruption. An old red sandal lies beside a broken water jug. A bronze cup rests near a woman's hairpin. These once precious objects are now meaningless tokens in a ruined villa. She was thrown into the mass grave with a broken leg. Archaeologists believe she may have been executed, possibly for trying to escape. A lover embracing his beloved. All different social classes swept up in a disaster that cared nothing for rank or wealth. In the Bay of Naples, 6 miles from Pompeii, it had hot springs, bars, gambling halls, and brothels. It was a luxurious playground for the rich and powerful. And in the Casa del Nettuno, the House of Neptune, they found the answer to the question of who died here. While many of the upper-class citizens were pulled out of the rubble and cremated with respect, the Praetorians were left to rot. In the courtyard, they were too dangerous to be allowed in the city. It was feared that their ghosts would haunt the town, but they were also too inconvenient to remove. After 600 years underground, their bones were finally gathered up and reinterred elsewhere. The team had discovered the remains of over 300 people. At first, they thought they had found a massed grave, a common burial for fallen soldiers. But instead of a tidy pit filled with corpses, they found a hodgepodge of individuals sprawled across the floor, buried under the ash. These people had been killed instantly, their bodies frozen as the pyroclastic flow crashed into the courtyard. But on August 24, 79 AD, it was buried by volcanic ash and pumice from Mount Vesuvius. It was destroyed in a single instant. In 1709, excavations uncovered the site. Archaeologists found preserved frescoes, jewelry, marble statues. It was as if the eruption had stopped time. It seemed almost too good to be true. And it was many of these treasures were looted from the site in the early days of discovery. One dealer even sold a fresco to a British collector in a London auction house. The owner of that painting didn't realize it was a piece of stolen history until the collector saw the news report and decided to anonymously return the work. Over the next centuries, more of the artifacts were smuggled out of the country. To this day, about 20% of all the objects found in Herculaneum are still missing. But in 1980, a new team started working at the site, determined to uncover what had been lost. In 2015, scientists used high-tech imaging to scan the courtyard without disturbing the site. They identified victims who had been unable to flee. It is also one of the few sites where we can learn about the lives of slaves from the period. As for the soldiers, the team was surprised to find that they were too well dressed to be auxiliary troops. Even after being killed, the soldiers were not treated fairly. Today, only a handful of skeletons remain in the courtyard. Archaeologists study the human remains from Herculaneum to learn more about how people died during the eruption. One team of scientists found that the average adult consumed about 5 gallons of seawater in the last days of their life. Ancient Romans never gave much thought to saving the lives of their soldiers, but some brave soldiers souls still wanted to be remembered. When Hannibal Barca died in 183 BC, the Carthaginians erected a tomb for him near his hometown of Carthage. And then there was Caesar Augustus, the first emperor of Rome, whose rule ushered in the Pax Romana, a long period of peace and prosperity. As for Spartacus, the record is silent. History ends with his name dissolving into legend. It's as if Rome chose not to remember him. Now you need to watch The Last Gladiator, or have a look at life and death in Pompeii. We know Pompeii's fate so well because its death throes were recorded by the most famous writer in the whole Roman world. Pliny the Younger wrote down every scream and shudder as Vesuvius unleashed its fury, burying his beloved uncle under tons of hot ash, covering entire cities in a matter of hours. When they returned to the coast, they found themselves knee-deep in fallen masonry, broken roof tiles, shattered household objects. They collected what they could carry, filled their boats, then returned to the noxious fumes of the volcano. Today, about 2/3 of Pompeii remains buried beneath the earth and ash that hid it from view for so long. Ground-penetrating radar revealed buried buildings, courtyards, and roads invisible to the naked eye. These scans showed the footprint of a bathhouse, an apartment complex, and even a fountain. These places hadn't just been lost to history. They'd been sitting right under archaeologists' noses the whole time. 2/3 of the city remains buried, and what you will see has been shaped by the work of archaeologists and restoration experts who've been excavating the site since the 18th century. Because of these efforts, the paintings, mosaics, and frescoes of Pompeii are more vibrant today than they would have been in antiquity. That's because we tend to prefer the spectacle of disaster. They might have been standing here when the ash fell, or they might have been placed here to attract the attention of 18th century tourists. We can't be sure. Just beyond my window, the sun glints off glass towers and the steel skeletons of buildings still in progress. The scene is quintessentially 21st century, and yet almost exactly 2,000 years ago. Someone somewhere was listening to the sounds of their own time. A Roman tuning out the traffic of Pompeii. Someone whose day stretched before them, full of possibilities, as ordinary and special as any in living memory. While most of Pompeii is still buried, the parts that we have excavated have been interpreted and reinterpreted to tell a story of disaster, and we can never know what the Romans saw when they walked these streets. Over the last 300 years, Pompeii has been presented as a ruined city, a ghostly shell of its former self. Its most famous image is the plaster cast of a man, woman, or child frozen in the posture of terror as the world turned to fire around them. Envision it split open to reveal the golden crumb within. See the baker run a cloth along the counter, wiping away flour and preparing for the next loaf. Hear the hiss of olive oil poured into a ceramic jug. Watch a vendor stack plump purple figs and juicy green grapes, weigh them out, wrap them in papyrus, and hand them to a customer. Now, at the heart of the action, you are here to bartering for a pot of honey or a length of linen, your voice adding to the hum of conversation. The sights, smells, and sounds envelop you, pulling you into the bustle of a Mediterranean market. Walking through the ruins, we encounter these casts and alcoves and doorways, each one presented with a little sign explaining their position at the moment of death. It's a city that seems impossibly familiar and strange all at once. So come, let's explore the untold stories of Pompeii. Let's get started. And thanks to conservation science, many of the artifacts in museums around the world are slowly being restored to their former glory. What we think of as ancient today is actually an interpretation of antiquity crafted by the choices that these experts have made over the course of 300 years. Since then, non-invasive techniques like this have made it possible to see the unexcavated portions of Pompeii in an entirely new light. Antiquities were unearthed to inform the tastes and curiosities of an elite European audience. Things were taken away from the site. Frescoes were cut out of walls and sold to private collectors. Marble statues and gems were pried from their settings and shipped to museums around the world. Sometimes objects were literally torn to pieces to make room for more exciting finds. What remained was subjected to centuries' worth of scientific ignorance and sometimes outright vandalism. Archaeologists thought they were restoring things to their original state by removing centuries' worth of grime and deposits, but they often did more harm than good, and the images have been nothing short of astonishing. The only way to explore what lies beneath the ground, therefore, is to dig deeper, much deeper, into the layers of history and archaeology that shape our understanding of the past. Some scavengers, some opportunists, some simply seeking to save something from the ruins. If you visit today, you'll find a popular tourist attraction. You'll see the same streets, buildings, and frescoes that captivated visitors 300 years ago. You'll wander through the Forum, the civic center of the city, surrounded by temples to the gods and goddesses of the Roman pantheon. You'll look down the Luminaire, the brothel, and imagine those who once plied their trade within its shady confines. You'll marvel at the exquisite frescoes of the Villa of Mysterium and trace the lines of the skeletal hands that were frozen in time when the ash fell from the sky. There must have been hundreds of loads of rubble carried away from the bay that day, perhaps more. Here we can stroll through the rooms, tracing our fingers across the preserved paintings on the walls and imagining what daily life might have been like inside. But other houses and shops, such as the bakery near the Forum, remain mostly hidden. Yet we can use scanning technologies like ground-penetrating radar and 3D modeling to walk through them. Virtually, at least, we can explore the contours of rooms, the thickness of walls, and the positions of windows, all without disturbing the soil above. But among these flotsam and jetsam, a few fragments escaped the notice of the looters. Hidden in plain sight, they sank into the oozing lava and toxic mud, never to be seen again until centuries later. He described how the pumice rained down from the sky like bombs. This exposed an intact fresco, which he recognized as a painting of Pompeii's patron deity, the goddess of fertility and the harvest. Word spread quickly through Europe's learned elite. Pompeii had been found. Excavations started immediately. By 1764, visitors were paying admission for the site with bricks from the ruins themselves. By the end of the century, 20,000 visitors paid to enter the city. Then, just as suddenly as the excavations had begun, they stopped. New digs didn't begin again until the 19th century, driven by new theories about Roman life and fueled by renewed public interest. How the darkness was so thick that midday seemed like midnight. Survivors struggled to breathe and fell victim to burning lungs and blindness. What Pliny couldn't know, because no one could know, was that this cataclysm would preserve a city so completely that we could pick up its crumbs 18 centuries later. A few miles away, on the shore of the Bay of Naples, people rode out into the gray haze, searching the wreckage for salvageable goods. The excavation of Pompeii began in 1748 when an Italian architect named Aloisio rebuilt a section of the city wall. But even though archaeologists have been carefully picking apart the ruined city for more than 300 years, only a fraction of it has been uncovered. In the 1990s, the Italian archaeologist Amedeo Maiuri used modern technology to peer below the surface without even digging. Some parts of Pompeii, like the House of the Veti, have been fully excavated. But why bother exploring this place virtually when we can experience the real thing? But remember, you won't be seeing all of Pompeii. When the excavations began, preservation was not part of the mission. These days, excavators take painstaking measures to preserve what they uncover. But despite all this care, what we see at Pompeii today looks different from what the ancients saw 2,000 years ago. But when we pause to examine these figures, we realize that we don't really know what they looked like. As I write this, I am listening to the distant rumble of traffic, the hum of air conditioning, the insistent buzz of a nearby lawnmower. Now, close your eyes again. Imagine a lump of warm bread, still steaming from the oven, brushed with oil and sprinkled with salt. This is the story of Pompeii. It is a tale not just of destruction, but of a life that went on uninterrupted until it wasn't. Stories about Pompeii and Herculaneum often focus on their demise, the end of their streets, lined with corpses frozen in terror. Yet there is more to tell, more that the silence of these cities can teach us if we know how to listen. We're going to explore what we can learn from the last days of Pompeii. When Vesuvius erupted in the year 79 CE, it did not announce itself with fire and thunder, not at first. In fact, it was still largely intact when it was rediscovered in 1748. This is because the eruption only covered part of the city and much of it remained exposed on the surface. The reason why so many people died was because they were caught off guard. Since Mount Vesuvius had been dormant for many years, everyone assumed that it had gone out for good. However, there are also a number of books and documentaries available that feature photographs of the art. So, when the eruption finally occurred, it was totally unexpected. Additionally, the weather was mild and pleasant, making it a very livable city. With all of these advantages, it's no wonder that Pompeii was one of the most popular cities in the Roman Empire, or that the city wasn't completely destroyed by the eruption of Mount Vesuvius. One bakery even had a room for enslaved workers, with chains still attached to the wall. On August of 2479 CE, the mountain blew its top and unleashed a torrent of lava, pumice, and ash onto the unsuspecting city. The city was completely destroyed, with its ruins preserved under a thick layer of ash. For centuries, people passed by the entrance to Pompeii every day without realizing that they were walking on top of a lost city. It wasn't until 1748 that the ruins were finally discovered. Since then, archaeologists have been excavating the site and uncovering the secrets of what happened in Pompeii. It was the worst natural disaster in European history, killing thousands and burying the entire city under a thick layer of debris. To this day, we're still uncovering the secrets of what happened in Pompeii. We hope you enjoyed learning about this amazing city, and we encourage you to come back for more fun facts about history. Thanks for watching. What we do know is that the eruption of Mount Vesuvius was one of the most devastating events in human history. Wine shops had stone counters with embedded jars, large amphorae sunk into them to hold cool liquids. Their interiors are still stained with centuries-old wine residue. In one home, the remains of a small dog were found curled beside the door. Because the city was buried so quickly, it froze life in Pompeii at the moment of the eruption. This means that archaeologists have been able to find everyday items like shoes, furniture, and food. These artifacts give us a glimpse into the daily life of the average person in Pompeii. We can see what they ate, how they lived, and even what they wore. It's like looking into a window on the past. Contrary to popular belief, the eruption of Mount Vesuvius did not totally destroy Pompeii. In fact, it was still largely intact when it was rediscovered in 1748. This is because the eruption only covered part of the city and much of it remained exposed on the surface. The reason why so many people died was because they were caught off guard. Since Mount Vesuvius had been dormant for many years, everyone assumed that it had gone out for good. So when the eruption finally occurred, it was totally unexpected. Pompeii was a major commercial center, and its economy was boosted by the fact that it was located near the sea. The city also benefited from being close to Naples, which was one of the most important cities in the Roman Empire. The disaster is thought to have claimed about 16,000 lives, along with the nearby city of Herculaneum, Stabia, and You may have heard the story from the classic book or movie Pompeii, which stars Kit Harington. However, there are some facts about Pompeii that many people don't know. As a result, Pompeii was able to enjoy a high standard of living and its citizens were generally happy. Of course, this would all change with the eruption of Mount Vesuvius, but until that time, life in Pompeii was pretty good. It began with tremors, shaking doors, graffiti on the walls reveals jokes, rivalries, and dreams. One scribble reads, "Successes was here. May he always be lucky in love." Another, perhaps less poetic, states simply, "I screwed the barmaid." So when the excavators arrived, they found a city that was perfectly preserved down to its last grapevine and chicken bow. While many of the buildings are still standing, the same cannot be said for the art that decorated them. Much of the artwork has been lost to time, but some of it has survived. For example, the frescoes in Villa Mysterium are some of the best preserved pieces of Roman art that exists today. The artwork in Pompeii was not only beautiful, but it was also highly skilled. The frescoes were painted on wet plaster and covered with multiple layers of vivid color. Many of the paintings depict scenes from Greek mythology. There are also a number of portraits. The portrait of Marcus Aurelius is particularly interesting because it is the only known painting of the emperor that was made during his lifetime. A glimpse of ancient humor, sharp and human. The disaster is thought to have claimed about 16,000 lives, along with the nearby city of Herculaneum, Stabia, and because the eruption of Mount Vesuvius blanketed the city in a thick layer of ash, which preserved it from the elements. This is also why it took so long to discover the city. Because the ash had preserved it so well, it was mistaken for a hill. In fact, people had been walking by the entrance to Pompeii for centuries without realizing that it was a tomb of a lost city. You may have heard of this story from the classic book or movie Pompeii, which stars Kit Harington. However, there are some facts about Pompeii that many people don't know. For instance, did you know that it took 1,700 years for the city to be or that the city wasn't completely destroyed by the eruption of Mount Vesuvius? Let's take a closer look at the latter point. Then came a rising column of ash, darkening the midday sky. People fled. Some did not. The volcanic material fell like snow, layering rooftops, then collapsing them. In the following hours, a rush of supersaturated gas and rock it silenced Pompeii in moments. But even in destruction, it preserved a moment in time, not just buildings, but motion, expression, daily life. When archaeologists began to excavate the site in the 18th century, they uncovered something astonishing. Voids in the hardened ash, empty spaces, once filled by the bodies of those who perished. By gently filling these spaces with plaster, researchers captured haunting silhouettes, people caught in their final gestures. The most famous example is the so-called The Three Philosophers, a trio of men engrossed in discussion as the world around them collapses. They stand upon the threshold of a building, forever frozen as they ponder whatever it was they were talking about when their world ended. And while this moment is certainly striking, it is also a bit unusual. Most people died not in the public square or on the street, but in their homes. And in many cases, the only thing left of them are the outlines of their bodies as they cowered in the corner, seeking shelter. The eruption of Mount Vesuvius is a well-known event in history. It buried the Roman city of Pompeii and several others under volcanic ash and pumice. Contrary to popular belief, the eruption of Mount Vesuvius did not totally destroy Pompeii. Now back to our topic. And yet, among the most fascinating finds are not the dramatic remnants of death, but the quiet evidence of life. As you wander through the ruins of Pompeii, you'll see that the houses are remarkably intact. In addition to preserving the city, the ash also killed all of the plants and animals in the area. If you want to see the artwork of Pompeii for yourself, you'll have to visit Italy. Life in Pompeii was not all bad. However, despite the fact that it was located near a volcano, it was a prosperous city. It is not surprising that Pompeii was such a desirable place to live, since it had everything that anyone could need, including food, water, and a strong economy. Mount Vesuvius erupted in the year 79 CE, burying the Roman city of Pompeii and several others under volcanic ash and pumice. For example, did you know that it took 1,700 years for the city to be rediscovered? There are over 30 bakeries in Pompeii with millstones for grinding grain, and ovens still dark with soot. All of this changed with the eruption of Mount Vesuvius. It is estimated that between 11,000 and 15,000 people were killed in Pompeii alone. with another 3,500 or so in her. One of the most amazing things about Pompeii is that it has preserved a snapshot of life in the ancient world. What's your favorite thing about Pompeii? Let us know in the comments below. When you think of ancient Rome, what comes to mind? Gladiators, chariots. Well, today, let's explore how the other half lived. Welcome back to the channel. Today, we visit an elite home in Pompeii. Any resemblance to our own lives might not be coincidental. Last time, we explored the house of a middle-class merchant. This time, we will see a world of mosaic floors, frescoed walls, and garden courtyards, where the wealthy elite maintain their dignity and power. But there is one thing you should know. While Pompeii is famous for its preserved frescoes, the majority were destroyed by centuries of vandalism. Most of the masterpieces we see today were created in the mid-20th century, inspired by archaeological finds and meant to evoke the style of the original decorations. Still, these works are fantastic in their own right, and they help us to imagine what life was like in the city before it was buried. So let's begin. The house was once the property of a Roman senator, Marcus Furius, but little is known about his life except that he held political office in his home city of Pompeii. Rome, his career might have benefited from his marriage into the elite Papeiae family, although his wife's dowry suggests she was not the wealthiest of his 5 wives. We can glean bits of information about him from graffiti carved into the stone lintels above doors. In some obscene jokes directed at him and his wives linger like bathroom graffiti, a reminder that even the elite were a fair game for public ridicule. A few years before the eruption, he undertook a series of costly renovations, including adding an atrium with a fountain, perhaps to impress visiting dignitaries or just to show off to the neighbors. He died after the eruption in 79 AD along with thousands of others, and his home became a tomb. We enter the atrium, the central room of any Roman house. Here light filtered down from an opening in the roof. This particular atrium was surrounded by so the owner didn't have to endure the heat of direct sunlight, but still had plenty of space to grow plants and trees. At the center stood a fountain with a basin supported by an elaborate bronze tripod. One imagines the splash of water mingling with the scent of flowers climbing up the garden wall. This would have been the perfect place for a quiet conversation with guests or reading a letter while enjoying the shade. On the opposite side of the atrium is the cubiculum or bedroom. Although it is spacious by our standards, the bed itself is quite small. Its tester posts are decorated with erotic scenes and the walls with mythological subjects. These include Ganymede, the Trojan prince abducted by Jupiter to serve as his cupbearer, and Narcissus, who fell in love with his own reflection. According to Ovid, he was punished by the gods for not appreciating their attention by being turned into a flower. The dining room is decorated with frescoes depicting scenes from Greek mythology. One shows the goddess Athena being born fully grown from Zeus's head, while the other depicts her victory over Poseidon in a contest to become the patron deity of the city of Athens. In both stories, Athena's birth or victory is accompanied by the creation of an olive tree. She gifted this tree to the Athenians as a symbol of peace and the source of a precious oil used in religious ceremonies. The Pompeian fresco also shows an olive tree, but its fruit has been replaced with grapes. This detail may seem insignificant until we consider that the atrium of this very house also features a grapevine entwined around the fountain's tripod. It seems the owners of this house took great pride in decorating their home with symbols of peace and prosperity. Across from the dining room is the triclinium or banquet hall. It is furnished with 3 couches for reclining guests and 2 wooden chairs. Unlike the dining room, this room's decoration features historical rather than mythological subjects. One fresco depicts a Roman triumph, where a victorious general leads a procession of prisoners, spoils, and dancing captives through a cheering crowd. Another shows a hunt in the Libyan desert. Here Roman soldiers pursue an African lion through tall grasses. Both scenes glorify Roman power and military success. Next, we visit the Peristyle, a colonnaded courtyard garden favored by Roman aristocrats. It acted as a transition between the public and private spaces of the house and was typically adorned with fountains and statues. This peristyle reflects a distinct Hellenistic influence. The 4 marble columns are topped with intricate Corinthian capitals, each boasting a different design. The central fountain is surrounded by bronze statues of Aphrodite and 2 of her lovers. The goddess's boyish young lover, Anchises, sits on a nearby stone. Meanwhile, her paramour, the Satyr Mars, leans against a palm tree. These sculptures reflect the popularity of Greek art and culture among the Roman elite, while the subject matter hints at the libertine habits of the upper classes. From the peristyle we pass into the tablinum, which opens onto the atrium. It was initially used as a place to store tablets and scrolls, but later became the center of administrative activities, including accounting. From here, one could keep an eye on slaves working in the garden, or the shops in the insula, or apartment block. When the master was traveling, this room could be locked up to protect valuable papers. Its thick marble walls help to muffle sound, creating a peaceful space to work or receive guests. Our tour continues into the Apoditerium, a dressing room lined with marble slabs for changing clothes and a mirror made of polished obsidian. In antiquity, glass mirrors were prohibitively expensive for all but the richest Romans. Instead, People of modest means used metal or stone mirrors. Obsidian mirrors were prized because their jet black surface was highly reflective and could display an accurate image. The slabs lining the room may have served as a makeshift gymnasium, allowing the owner to exercise without the need for a separate palestra or workout area. We may never know for sure, but if these stones did double as workout equipment, this is an early example of how the wealthy could afford luxuries like indoor gyms. But our tour of the House of the Senator is not yet over. There are still many more places to discover, so join us next time as we continue exploring this lavish estate. If you enjoyed today's episode, check out our video on the gladiator barracks in Pompeii. There we use CGI to reconstruct what daily life was like for gladiators preparing for combat. Remember to subscribe for more videos like these. In ancient Rome, food was more than just sustenance. It was a tool of power and prestige, a marker of social status, and most importantly, a means to build relationships and influence. Everywhere you went, you would see vendors selling various fruit, from the ubiquitous bread and fruit to more exotic items like African figs or Syrian dates. These street foods were not just for the common people. Even the elite enjoyed a good tart of plums or pears while strolling through the forum. Here you could enjoy a mug of wine or beer alongside your meal, and perhaps even throw in some dice on a table with a friend. These establishments offered a more refined dining experience, with better food, more comfortable seating, and a wider selection of drinks. It was also the restaurant was a place where people from all walks of life could come together and rub shoulders with the city's movers and shakers. Here a merchant could chat with a senator, an artist could mingle with a gladiator, and a soldier could share a table with a poet. The transition from the bustling streets to the quiet, meticulously ordered interior was striking. It was typically surrounded by a colonnade that provided shade and privacy. This was the room where the host would entertain his guests with lavish feasts. The triclinium was decorated with fine paintings and sculptures, and the walls were covered in frescoes depicting scenes from Roman mythology or daily life. The meals were typically served on plates made of silver or gold, and the dishes were made of fine porcelain or crystal. The wine was served in elegant goblets and carcanum, which were large containers made of clay or metal that held several gallons of wine. Appetizers were served on small plates and might include olives, figs, or grapes. The goal was to make the visitors feel welcome and comfortable, and they would do anything to ensure that their stay in Rome was enjoyable. Meals were not just about sustenance, but an opportunity to display wealth, power, and cultural sophistication. Whether reclining on a couch in a wealthy Romanesque dining room or grabbing a quick bite to eat at a tavern, food was an integral part of daily life in ancient Rome. Was it the elaborate meals served to the emperor or the simple fare enjoyed by the common folk? Which historical figure would you most like to have dinner with? Why? Share your answers in the comments section. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more engaging history videos. Until next time, keep learning and stay curious. By understanding the social and cultural norms surrounding food and dining in ancient Rome, we can gain a deeper appreciation for this fascinating aspect of Roman culture. The main course would arrive on a large platter and might consist of roasted meat, fish, or poultry. What's the first thing you notice? The sights, the sounds, the smells. How does it make you feel? Is it overwhelming? Exciting? Curious? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Vegetables were often served steamed or grilled, and fruit was served for dessert. The furniture was made of precious wood such as ivory or silver, and the dining couches were upholstered in fine fabrics. In the center of the atrium was a fountain or a pool, which collected rainwater and added to the tranquility of the space. The host would invite influential people from all over the empire, including senators, generals, and ambassadors. The guest list would vary depending on the host's interests and goals, but it was always a mix of old friends and new acquaintances. The dinner parties were a chance for the Romans to catch up on the latest news, discuss politics, or just relax and enjoy each other's company. This posture was not only comfortable, but it was also a symbol of wealth and leisure. Only the upper classes could afford to recline while eating, since it was seen as a waste of time to be anything other than horizontal while enjoying a good meal. The sound of trickling water mixed with the scent of fresh flowers and herbs created an atmosphere of relaxation and calm. Stepping into the atrium, one would feel like they had entered a sanctuary, a peaceful oasis amidst the chaos of the city. The conversation was lively and stimulating, and the camaraderie was unmatched. They were the fine dining establishments of ancient Rome. Patrons could choose from a variety of dishes, including appetizers, main courses, and desserts. No trip to ancient Rome would be complete without an invitation to dine at the home of a wealthy Roman. One could experience the height of Roman luxury and excess, a far cry from the simple fare served in the taverns, and appetizers might include things like oysters or pickled vegetables, while main courses could feature roasted meats, fish, or even exotic game. For dessert, there was fruit nuts or honey-sweetened cakes. Taverns were a Roman institution, found on almost every street corner. They were places where men went to relax, drink, gamble, and socialize. The atmosphere was usually boisterous and loud, with patrons crowding around tables and benches to play games, drink, and swap stories. Food played a pivotal role in Roman society, and for a visitor to ancient Rome, understanding the food and dining customs was crucial to navigating the city's complex social hierarchy. They were a familiar sight along the streets, belching out steam and filling the air with the delicious aroma of freshly baked bread. These neighborhood bakeries supplied the city with its daily bread, the panis quadrata, square-shaped loaf that was a staple of the Roman diet. The first thing that would strike any visitor to ancient Rome would be the omnipresence of food in public spaces. One of the most iconic symbols of Roman life was the baker's oven, the thermopole. For those who wanted something a bit more substantial, there were the thermopolia that served up hot meals. These were basically fast food joints where you could grab a quick bite to eat on the go. The menu might include polenta, a porridge-like dish made from millet or wheat, or pulse, a thick soup with chunks of vegetables and sometimes meat. These were cheap, filling meals that were perfect for the working class, but they weren't exactly gourmet fare. And then there were the taverns, the tabernae, where you could get a bit more than just food. But for the truly discerning diner, there was no better place to visit than the restaurant Sacop. It wasn't just the food that made the caffeine so popular. However, while visiting these public eateries would have been a great way to sample the diverse culinary offerings of Roman cuisine, entering the house of a wealthy Roman was akin to entering a different world. The atrium was the heart of the Roman house, a large, open space that served as a combination reception room, dining room, and garden. From the atrium, guests would pass into the dining room. Instead of chairs, the Romans reclined on couches that were placed around a central table. The food served in the triclinium was a mix of Mediterranean and Middle Eastern cuisine. Wine was an essential part of the Roman feast. The triclinium would have a special wine room where the bottles were kept. The feast was not just about the food. However, it was also about the company. The Romans took great pride in their hospitality, and they spared no expense when it came to entertaining their guests. To truly appreciate the food of ancient Rome, it's important to understand the context in which it was eaten. Imagine you've just arrived in ancient Rome. You're eager to explore this ancient civilization and all it has to offer. What did you find most interesting about ancient Rome's food and dining customs? It's a rare privilege to be invited to dinner at the house of a Roman senator. Tonight we shall attend to our appetites, enjoy fine entertainment, and witness the subtle displays of power that make this world go round. Our host is a man of standing and wealth, though not quite at the pinnacle of power. The flavors are sharp and complex. Romans loved to contrast textures and temperatures, sour with sweet, crisp with soft. You might not recognize every ingredient. There is garum, a fermented fish sauce that accompanies nearly every dish. Strong, salty, and strange. Some are familiar, lamb with rosemary, beans with onion swile, others are more foreign. Sea urchins, jellyfish, or salzada, delicately boiled. Our host moves with practiced ease, circulating among the couches to pour wine and welcome compliments. A senator must be gracious, especially at table. Laughter rings out, echoing into the atrium. Slaves hurry to refill goblets before anyone notices them empty. Honeyed pastries, sometimes even chilled wine, if snow from the mountains has been brought down and stored in deep cellars. The company lounges, enjoying the sweetness and richness after the savory courses. Perhaps someone recites a poem, or someone else tells a story of daring adventure or outrageous fortune. Others clear away dishes, though some stubborn guests sometimes prefer to push food around with their fingers. Another strums a lyre and sings of the deeds of Achilles. The lights dim as the lamps burn lower. The scent of spiced wine lingers in the air, and faint music, perhaps a reed flute or a plucked lyre, echoes from an adjoining room. The senator excuses himself and retires to a private chamber. Soon, servants begin to clear away the remains of the feast, leaving only a few scattered figs and grapes. Servants move silently about, topping up drinks and clearing away the remnants of the meal. As the evening wears on, some guests grow bolder, flushed by wine and the thrill of revelry. Still, you observe the nicety. You notice when someone knocks over a cup or spills a plate of figs. You are there to help pick up the pieces. You praise the music, the dancing, the food. You flatter the host. You do not complain if your portion of fruit is meager or too sweet. If you are asked for a poem, you recite something by you keep your voice moderate, your laughter restrained. You have seen how drunkenness can make fools of men. To you, dear guests, may fortune smile upon you always. Each guest repeats the toast after him. May fortune smile upon you always. It is late, and even the wealthy must eventually rest. Servants clear away the couches and lay down couches for sleeping guests. Blankets are brought. You are shown out quietly. The marble halls stretch in shadow. Somewhere, the rustle of fabric and the creak of a door. Outside, the sounds of the city drift in on the breeze. The distant rattle of a chariot, the shout of a vendor. But mostly, there is silence. The Roman night is still. The stars above are the same ones that have always watched over the city through its labor and leisure, its glory and ruin. He gestures humbly, but the room is watching him always. Every guest, every slave. Their eyes weigh his every word, observing his silences, assessing his every gesture, a twitch of his lips, a glance toward a particular guest, a careless touch on a shoulder. All are noted and discussed later over dinner parties and whispered in taverns. It is not enough to be a great orator in the forum. You must excel at banquets, too. All Romans are actors, and you play your part well. Some call for the bill, but others, more generous or more indebted to the host, ask for it to be put off till another day. Our senator belongs to the latter group. He waves away the request. Tonight, he will pay for all. This is customary for a host, but he also hopes that his generosity will not go unnoticed. A candidate for higher office. He is keen to remind his fellow senators of his elegant manners and munificence. After all, it is easier to talk with food in one's hand than a goblet. A musician steps forward with a reed flute. The notes rise and fall around him. Other instruments join, a cithara, a tibia, a pair of castanets. They play a lively tune, urging the guests to dance. Feet shuffle, couples form, the room spins. Laughter rings out again. For a brief while, the weight of Rome's burden seems lifted. With bread, olives, cheese, and fruit, these appetizers prepare us for the feast to come. I am no expert, but I believe it is a delicacy from Alexandria, a kind of eel prepared with vinegar and spices. I know you love such delicacies. He knows nothing of the sort, but your face should betray nothing. Servants move silently and swiftly, removing plates, clearing away refuse, and readying the table for sweets. They work quickly so as not to interrupt the flow of conversation, which your host has kept lively since the first course. With his status, he could afford to hire a professional parasite like the poet Catullus at Rome. People paid good money for witty conversation, rousing stories and flattering verses. Without such companions, the dinner party could drag. A long silence was the worst insult a host could suffer. And so our senator entertains. You take the proffered dish and sample it with an appreciative nod. Indeed, well then perhaps you can tell me what this dish is. It arrives covered in gold leaf and fragrant smoke. Ah, a wild boar from the hills near Norba. Its tusks were found beneath the hearth in the temple of Apollo. What luck to catch such a beast. Such game is fit for a king, but you will forgive me if I confess my preference for the venison of northern Africa. Its flesh tastes of cinnamon and cloves. You have never heard of Africa, much less tasted African game. But you know the names of famous dishes and ingredients, and you drop them into conversation. To do otherwise would be to court disgrace. Your ignorance would become common knowledge and your reputation as a gourmand would be ruined. He lives in a grand house, but not one of the largest. His chariots are fine, but not gilded. His slaves are many, yet not so numerous as to arouse envy. Tonight, we dine with moderation, which is how the best Romans dine. Let the Eastern kings consume mountain loads of gold. Let the nouveau-rich barbarians gobble up their Celtic beef broths. We Romans prefer a little variety with our The first course, the Gestasio, is light. Perhaps boiled eggs, pickled vegetables, oysters if they've come fresh from the coast, or a salad of herbs dressed in fish sauce and oil. As daylight fades and twilight deepens, the first course is cleared away, and it is time for the main course, the prima mensa. This is where the host shows his status, not through extravagance alone, but in variety. First come platters bearing roasted fowl, perhaps goose or dacour, a delicate stew of veal and leeks. Sometimes more exotic meats are served. Peacock, dormouse, or boar's head, elaborately presented. Next come the stews and main courses in silver or gold vessels. These are removed from the triclinium by lictors or freedmen carrying them on their forearms or balanced on their heads. One of these days, you may receive such an honor, to carry a dish for your master. In these moments, the dining room becomes a stage. All eyes watch the procession. All ears strain to hear the clink of metal on stone and the murmur of voices, discussing what dish is what. The dishes are not large, but numerous. The emphasis is on display. Surprise and abundance. Each bite is an experience. Your neighbor leans closer and whispers, "Do you know what this dish is?" An opportunity for conversation. You learned that one from your Latin teacher. As the repast winds down, the host grows serious. He takes up a dish and offers it to you. "Here, try this." When the secunda mensa arrives, the guests recline further back on their couches. Dessert arrives. Fresh fruit, grapes, figs, dates stuffed with nuts. At the end of the evening, when all are satisfied, the host rises. It is time for the final courtesies. He raises his glass. He motions for musicians to begin. Someone strikes a bronze drum. The sound echoes through the atrium. The senator himself reclines at the place of honor, though he is careful to appear modest. His toga is clean but not ostentatious. In the corner, someone sings a song of Helena Troy. Some guests lie back, closing their eyes against the music. The evening slows. The eating fades. Too quiet sipping. Some guests have closed their eyes. Others speak in murmurs. Today we head to one of the most popular tourist destinations in the world. Rome we regone now. Go back to 80 AD and spend a day in the life of a wealthy Roman like you. Your atrium is filled with plants that were brought inside for the winter months ago. This was a road that connected Rome to the rest of Italy. and was often lined with roadside inns and restaurants called taverns. After making your way to the front of your home, you unlock the bronze doors and step outside into the bright sunlight. They are obviously engaged in a lively discussion, and as you pass by, they fall silent. In between them, a large archway stretches wide to allow passage. You stop briefly to ensure that you have all of your valuables with you, then walk through the gate into the city. They know who you are and do not want to distract you from your business. As the name suggests, it is here that the animal sacrifices take place. You also pick up some fresh fruit for your wife and daughter and continue on your way. You stop to listen to a particularly heated argument between two men. One is tall and muscular with a thick red beard. The other is short and skinny with a sharp nose. They are arguing over whether Rome should expand its borders or focus on defending its current holdings. Here, near the top of the hill, is your final destination for the day. You hail a cab and ride back to your villa, where you will no doubt eat a wonderful dinner and sleep in your comfortable bed. But for now, as the moonlight paints silver streaks across your ceiling, these are just stories whispered by the wind. For you, the night is calm, the stars are kind, and in this moment, the world is full of peace. Or perhaps that's just what you tell yourself as you drift off to sleep. What more could you ask for? If so, then be sure to check out our other videos on ancient Rome, and let us know in the comments below what you would do differently. If you were a wealthy Roman for a day, thanks for watching. You arrive at the house of Augustus and step inside. This was once the home of the first emperor of Rome. Now it is a museum filled with artifacts from the Roman Empire. You walk through room after room, taking in the sights. Finally, you'll reach the throne room. Here, high up on a dais, is the throne of Augustus himself. You climb the stairs and sit down on the cold marble. You feel the weight of history all around you and can almost hear the echoes of past emperors thundering through the halls. You aren't sure which side is right, so you just stand there listening to them yell at each other. Eventually, they noticed you standing there and fall silent. They apologize for the disturbance and you move on. The air is heavy with the smell of blood and smoke, but you do not seem to mind. The sound is catchy and you find yourself tapping your foot along to the beat. He introduces you to his son, who is blushing slightly at the attention. You joke around for a bit, then begin discussing business matters. Your friend wants you to invest in a new project and you agree to think about it. You shake hands on the deal and say your goodbyes. When the song ends, you applaud and the musicians bow before continuing on their way. This is a common sight in Rome, and you are used to it by now. You walk past stalls where vendors sell meat, fish, and vegetables. You paid to have a private box built into the stands so that you can enjoy the games without being jostled around by the crowds. The gladiators are practicing in the arena and you watch for a while, fascinated by their skill and agility. You cheer loudly when one of the gladiators strikes an opponent's shield with such force that it breaks into. The crowd roars its approval and you join in enthusiastically. Further on, you come across the Temple of Apollo, where soothsayers practice their craft. You think about stopping for a moment to hear what the future holds for you, but decide against it. There will be other times for that. For now, you must focus on the task at hand. You head towards the Forum, the beating heart of Roman life. On the way, you pass by the Forum Magnum, or Great Forum. It is here that major legal proceedings are held, but today the court is not in session. You pause for a moment to admire the Temple of Saturn, then continue on your way. Some may be trying to earn money by having you hire them as a laborer. Others may simply be admiring the strong and sturdy obelisk that serves as a marker for travelers. Either way, you continue along the road without giving them a second thought. You have places to be and things to buy. The air is crisp and carries a scent of orange blossoms and roasting meat. You live a life of luxury and comfort. Life is good, but deep in the heart of Rome, there is trouble brewing. Slaves are plotting to overthrow their masters and senators squabble over who gets to sit where. He tells you that his son is getting married soon and asks if you will attend the wedding. Of course, you agree and make plans to meet him at the house of his brother, Marcus Atenius Rufus. Then you part ways and go about your business. The fires of discontent burn brightly, but out here in the suburbs, life is still good, their roots growing thick and strong in their terracotta pots. A slave waits by your bedside ready to assist you in any way necessary. He or she asks you, how would you like to spend your day? Do you want to go to the Forum to watch a senator speak about politics? Perhaps you would like to visit the markets near the Tiber River to pick up some new clothes, or maybe you'd like to throw a party at your villa outside of the city. What will it be today? Well, maybe not exactly like you, but at least you have some money. Let's get started. You awake with the sunrise as birds tweet from the atrium beyond your bedroom walls. Your villa is located in a suburb of Rome, one of many that line the Appian Way. Maybe you had a fine breakfast of eggs, olives, and bread dipped in honey while watching the charioteers train in the distance along the Appian Way. The massive wheels kicked up clouds of dust that drifted across the fields. You don't pay them much mind though as you continue to eat in peace. Once finished, you beckon to your slave and he cleans your plate while you adjust your toga. Today, you will be traveling into the city. There is much to discuss with business associates, and you need to acquire some supplies from merchants in the city center. So you and your retinue set off down the Appian Way towards Rome. You pass a group of men gathered around a stone monolith. After about an hour, you see the walls of Rome ahead of you. Two obelisks flank the entrance to the city. The streets of Rome are bustling with activity. Merchants hawk their wares to passers-by, while others simply get out of your way so as not to delay your progress. You stop to greet a friend whom you haven't seen in some time. The streets become narrower as you approach the Forum Boarium, also known as the Butcher's Forum. As you make your way through the crowded market area, you stop to admire a beautiful piece of pottery and purchase it. The forum is in full swing when you arrive. Senators and other important people are discussing politics and current events. You come across a group of musicians playing a lively tune on a nearby rooftop. You enter the Basilica Aemilia and find your friend waiting for you. You leave the Basilica and make your way to the Colosseum. When the games are over, you leave the Colossus and make your way to the Palatine Hill. When you leave the museum, it is dark and the stars are shining brightly in the night sky. You may have heard the cries of the oppressed, seen the flickering flames of rebellion, and felt the tremors of a restless earth. What did you think? Did you enjoy your day in the life of a wealthy Roman?